Hello and welcome to the inaugural Coasters Optional podcast. I am your host, Bennett, coming to you from the Coasters Optional Lounge. And this is a brand new rock music podcast where I'm going to be playing classic rock, new rock, everything in between, not just the hits you hear on satellite radio or FM radio, but these are deep cuts, B-sides, live versions, cover versions, everything in between where we're going to be digging deep into the catalog of all the great rock and roll artists of past and present, playing some stuff you just don't hear anywhere else. This is a continuation of a radio show that I did way back in the 90s when I was a student at Penn State Student Radio, WKPS. And I did a little show, which is basically just what we're doing here, called the State Your Face Rock and Roll Show. And I just thought I'd bring it back so we could, listen to some good music, some stuff you don't hear anywhere else. You can listen to this casually while you're doing other things. Or, of course, if you're interested in hearing a little background on the artists and what they're doing at the time of these songs, you can listen to that as well. So thank you so much for listening. I'd love any suggestions or comments. Of course, like, rate, subscribe, all that stuff. And thank you for watching the inaugural broadcast of the Coasters Optional podcast. All right. So the inaugural edition of the Coasters Optional podcast is going to feature the Talking Heads. For the first several of these episodes, I think what I'm going to do is sort of feature one band and maybe tell the story behind the band and give a little context to their career. I've just been listening to a lot of Talking Heads lately, which is why I chose them. But also, I think they're sort of the perfect band to start with because they're not really classic rock. They're not really punk either. And over their 12-year career, they really evolved. So I just think it'd be cool to take a little tour of the Talking Heads discography with a little bit from each era throughout their career. So they started off in the late 70s, backlash to disco, backlash to sort of classic rock, punk scene. Never really as heavy as the Ramones or a lot of those other bands. And they were basically art students that got together, namely led by David Byrne, who to this day is sort of one member of the band that has really gone on to a lot of success outside of the Talking Heads. He's always talking about how he's moving forward, doesn't want to do any like reunions with the Talking Heads. Probably heard of his Broadway play, I think it's called American Utopia, and a bunch of other stuff that he's produced since the Talking Heads broke up years ago. So he's sort of the leader. In some of the newer interviews, he talks about how young and angsty he was at the beginning, when he was just a young dude. He was unsure of himself, unsure of, like a lot of us were back in our 20s. And so it really came out in the music. So the first couple albums, the best way I can describe it is reading from Stephen Thomas Erlewine's biography on allmusic.com, which basically says, at the start of their career, the Talking Heads were all nervous energy, detached emotion, and subdued minimalism. That's a good way to describe kind of their early stuff. Not really accessible if you're just into classic rock. So, which is why I'm going to sort of get you into that here with some music from their first couple albums. So let's start off with these first couple minimalistic albums that were definitely quirky, but still had some kind of melodic root, some kind of hook that fans like that really still holds up today. This is from their first album called Talking Heads 77. The track that most people probably know is Psycho Killer, which is, of course, in the pop culture for 50 years now, in movie soundtracks, all kinds of stuff. So Psycho Killer is towards the end of the album. But I want to start off with just the first track because it's the first track, first album, and really melodic, not as quirky as some of the other ones. And of course, the second track, which I'm going to play as well, called New Feeling, is definitely more of the quirky side of it. So we're going to start off with Love Comes to Town from Talking Heads 77, followed by New Feeling from the same album. And then we're going to go to a track from their second album, which is More Songs About Buildings and Food. And the song is called Found a Job. And when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit about some of their next evolution, their next album, Fear of Music. But let's get into the music now with 3 songs from the Talking Heads' first 2 albums. Here we go.
Mystery, love. sitting down, but I'm still thinking about my friends in my garden moments. But now I'm speaking about my friends. Now I'm speaking out, thinking about my friends. Damn that television! What a bad picture! Don't get upset. It's not a major disaster. There's nothing on tonight, you said. I don't know what's the matter. Nothing's ever wrong, she said. So I don't know why you bother. We've heard this little scene. We've heard it many times. We're fighting over little things and wasting precious
Welcome back to the Coasters Optional podcast. I am your host, Bennett, and we are featuring talking heads today, going through from the beginning of their career to the end, a couple songs from each album, basically showing how they evolved and just playing some awesome music. We just heard two songs from their first album, Talking Heads 77. That was Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town and New Feeling, followed by Found a Job from their second album, More Songs About Buildings and Food. Now we're going to move into the polyrhythm era of the Talking Heads. So they connected for their second album with Brian Eno, who's a famous artist and producer, and he encouraged them to really focus on their drum section or their rhythm section for Fear of Music, and just expanded their repertoire, maybe not as quirky, a little bit more kind of melodic and flowing, I would say. And there's some, classic songs. The one that most people have heard from Fear of Music is Life During Wartime. This followed the next album, which according to allmusic.com, the polyrhythmic approach came into full fruition with Remain in Light. In this album, they added a horn section, some funk bass, some keyboards, a lot of stuff. So this let them experiment, come up with maybe a little bit more jammed out songs, a little bit longer. The big song from this that most people have heard is Once in a Lifetime. But of course, on Coasters Optional, we're not going to play the hits. We're going to play some of the deeper cuts so that we can listen to some really good music that's not the stuff you hear all the time. So that's the whole point of this inaugural podcast. Thank you for listening. So we're going to get into Cities from Fear of Music. And again, you can really hear the rhythm section here and sort of the different rhythms that are produced in this song, followed by two songs from Remain in Light. First song is called Born Under Punches, The Heat Goes On. The following is The Great Curve. And what I like about this pairing is that Born Under Punches definitely has kind of some weird, electronics going on here. The song, the way I like to describe it, it's not very accessible, not easy to listen to at first from a kind of melodic standpoint, but it's a really cool song and it's got some really cool instrumentation there. And then The Great Curve, you can also hear the drums and all the different instruments, but this is more of a rocker. So we're starting out with the first song from Remain in Light called Born Under Punches, followed by The Great Curve. Before that, we're going to do Cities from Fear of Music, and we're going to get into more Talking Heads right now. So enjoy.
Think of London, a small city, dark, dark in the daytime. People sleep in the daytime. If they want to, I'm checking them out. I got it figured out. There's good points, some bad points. It all works out. No, I'm a little freaked out now. Find some of you people just about missed it. Last time to make plans. I'm a tumbler. I'm a government man. Never seen anything like that before. Falling bodies tumble across the floor. Well, I'm a tumbler. When you get to where you wanna be. Thank you, thank you. When you get to where you wanna be. Don't even mention it. Oh, take a look at these hands. They're passing in between us. Take a look at these hands. Take a look at these hands. I don't have to mention it. No thanks. I'm a government man.
We're back on the Coasters Optional podcast. I am Bennett, your host, coming to you from the Coasters Optional Lounge. Thank you for listening. This is the very first edition of the podcast, which is a continuation of the radio show I did back in college, back in the 90s, called the State Your Face Rock and Roll Show, when I was a student at Penn State, playing classic rock, new rock, everything in between, the B-sides, the closet classics, the live versions, just getting way more in depth than you might hear on your sort of classic rock format radio. Again, today we're doing Talking Heads. We're sort of going in order of their discography, just playing a little bit from each album, showing how they evolved from this kind of quirky, awkward band from the late 70s that played, in the CBGB's era of, New York City, where they, those bands like the Ramones and Patti Smith and all these kind of new wave, punk, all kinds of bands. And so they started off really quirky back then. Now we're about halfway through the discography. We're at Speaking in Tongues and the Little Creatures era. So before we get into that, just to recap what we played so far, we had Cities from Fear of Music, Born Under Punches, The Heat Goes On from Remain in Light, and The Great Curve also from Remain in Light. And those were what we would call the Brian Eno years, where he was very influential in their sound, sort of African-inspired polyrhythms. So the songs have a lot more instrumentation than the first couple albums. There's keyboards, there's electric guitar. I love that ending to Great Curve there, where it's really sort of like a killer classic rock guitar solo there with, of course, the background vocals and everything. So that's what we just played. And now we're again going into the kind of more pop era. I guess the best way just to describe these next couple albums is just sort of 80s pop. Definitely still new wave sound, still in the Talking Heads style, not your typical pop music from the 80s, but definitely more accessible. The Speaking in Tongues album has a lot of what was on the live album Stop Making Sense. We're going to get to that later. I'm going to play a lot from that concert album at the end of the episode, but this album has songs such as Burning Down the House and Slippery People, Making Flippy Floppy, stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff you hear on that album, or the live album, so we're going to get to that later, followed by The Road to Nowhere from Little Creatures. And these are just some good songs that you don't hear all the time. So let's get into those now with This Must Be the Place and Road to Nowhere from the Talking Heads.
Well, we know where we're going, but we don't know where we've been. And we know what we're knowing, but we can't say what we've seen. And we're not little children, and we know what we want, and the future is certain. Give us time to work it out. Yeah. We're on the road to nowhere. Come on inside. Taking that ride to nowhere. We'll take that ride. Feeling okay this morning, and you know we're on a road to paradise. Here we go, here we go. We're on a ride to nowhere. Come on inside. Taking that ride to nowhere. We'll take that ride. Maybe wonder where you are. I don't care. Here is where time is on our side. Take you there. Take you there. We're on a road to nowhere. We're on a road to nowhere. We're on a road to nowhere. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride. It's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day. And it's alright, baby, it's alright. Would you like to come along and help me sing this song? And it's alright, baby, it's alright. We can tell you what to do, but they'll make a fool of you. And it's alright, baby, it's alright. There's a city in my mind. Come along and take that ride. And it's alright, baby, it's alright. And it's very far away, but it's growing day by day. And it's alright, baby, it's alright. And would you like to come along and help me sing this song? And it's alright, baby, it's alright. Gonna tell you what to do, 'cause I'll make a fool of you. And it's alright, baby, it's alright. We're on a road to nowhere. Hey! We're on a road to nowhere. We're on a road to nowhere. We're on a road to nowhere.
And we're back on the Coasters Optional podcast. I am Bennett, your host. You were listening to the inaugural edition of this brand new podcast, which is a continuation of a radio show I did back when I was a student at Penn State back in the 90s. It's basically a rock and roll show with a little bit of deep cuts, B-sides, and live versions that you don't hear on the classic rock formatted radio stations, and I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying listening to some of this music too. So today we're talking about the Talking Heads. We're listening to a little bit of their music from each of their albums, going from their early days when they were a quirky, eclectic, new wavy band playing in New York City in the late 70s, all the way through sort of not quite mainstream, but definitely more of a pop-oriented band from the late 80s. We just heard a couple songs from kind of the middle of the career. We heard This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody from their Speaking in Tongues album. This album has a lot of the songs that are on the live movie and live concert soundtrack to Stop Making Sense. You've got, Burning Down the House, you've got Making Flippy Floppy, some of the different songs that are featured there. And I'm going to spend a lot of time towards the end of this podcast with some songs from the Stop Making Sense soundtrack. We've followed that up with Road to Nowhere from Little Creatures. And now we're going to get into an interesting era of the band. This is an era that I just personally discovered in the last year or so. This is the soundtrack to the movie True Stories. And this was definitely an overlooked album on my part. But, in preparing for this podcast and just sort of wanting to hear the whole Talking Heads catalog, I sort of fell in love with this album, which is, again, the soundtrack to the movie. And this is, an opportunity for me to sort of get on my soapbox about kind of, music criticism, where reading sort of, I go to allmusic.com. I got to give them props for being sort of the, kind of pop music kind of encyclopedia where I get a lot of my information and I read a lot of my reviews. But what I always find interesting when you read these reviews is, they're coming from a critical standpoint. And oftentimes the way they describe the music and they describe the albums towards their ratings have nothing to do with the actual listenability and how good the songs are. So this is a great example. If you go to their review by Michael Hastings, again on the AllMusic website, basically it says, "Time has not been kind to the Talking Heads' ancillary soundtrack to David Byrne's oddball directorial debut. Though it generated one of the band's biggest radio hits, Wild Wild Life, both the film and its songs were dismissed as self-consciously quirky retreads of other, better material, and it's well known that the quartet was beginning to splinter apart around the time of these sessions." If you read that, you would think that this album is like unlistenable garbage. And I can't speak for the movie. I honestly have not seen it. Some people love it. I heard it's like really weird, which you would expect. But this album is just killer. It's got a lot of good songs. It flows well. It's got some just great music on there. So I'm going to ignore Michael Hastings' review. All due respect to Michael Hastings. And I'm going to play 3 songs from Talking Heads' True Stories. One is Puzzlin' Evidence. One is People Like Us. And finally, the ballad of City of Dreams. And I defy anyone who likes good rock and roll music to say that these songs are not good. And in my opinion, time has been very kind to this album. So let's get into it now, and then we're going to get into some more Talking Heads, obviously after this music break, and then spend a lot of time with Stop Making Sense soundtrack a little later. So thanks for listening. This is the Coasters Optional Podcast, and I am Bennett, your host, coming to you from the Coasters Optional Lounge. Here we go with 3 songs from the Talking Heads' True Stories.
Papa couldn't afford to buy us much. He said, be proud of what you are. There's something special about people like us. People like us who will answer the telephone. People
And we're back on the Coasters Optional podcast. We are focusing on the Talking Heads today, going through their discography from beginning to end, with a couple omissions that we'll get to in just a minute. Before that, let's recap the triple shot we just heard from the True Story soundtrack. This is the movie directed by David Byrne. And as I mentioned in the intro, time has not been kind to this album. According to the review on allmusic.com by Michael Hastings, I would argue that these are not self-conscious, quirky retreads of other better material, but just a group of killer songs, as evidenced by what we just heard, which was Puzzlin' Evidence, People Like Us, and the incredible moving ballad City of Dreams. So we're going to finish up the show with a reaction video to the first several songs of the Talking Heads classic concert film Stop Making Sense. This is heralded as one of the top concert videos of all time. It was directed by Jonathan Demme, who went on to Academy Award winning director, went on to do Married to the Mob and Silence of the Lambs. So it's filmed very artfully and very professionally. But what makes this movie different from just your standard concert movie is how they sort of roll out the songs from sort of what I did on this podcast, which is to sort of start the sort of rudimentary beginnings of Talking Heads, very simple instrumentation, all the way through where about halfway through the movie where we get to Burning Down the House, which has about 8 or 10 other musicians. They have keyboardists, they have backup singers, they have this whole theatrical production, but it starts off with just David Byrne on the acoustic guitar. So let's start the movie now and we'll watch it together. All right, so as we get into the opening credits here, just tell you a little bit about the Talking Heads band. Mentioned David Byrne several times during this podcast. He's obviously the most famous band member. He's gone on to the most solo success, not even necessarily pop music. He has American Utopia, the hit Broadway play, a bunch of other stuff that he's known for since the breakup in the early 90s. But of course, the band was incredibly talented, as you'll see in this video. So, as we get into this kind of opening where it's very sparse, and in a minute you'll just see David Byrne walking out with his acoustic guitar and a boombox, we can just tell you a little bit about the rest of the band. We have Chris France on drums, Tina Weymouth on bass, Jerry Harrison on keyboards and guitar. Those are the main 4 members. They formed in 1975. Always thought it was interesting that they have a female bassist, which is just not something you see a lot in rock music. So, of course, you have the super talented Tina Weymouth on bass. She's amazing. So he comes out in his dorky suit and just says one sentence before getting started. You'll notice the 80s style boombox, which is a cassette player with speakers on it. This is what we had way back before MP3s and before CDs, so check that thing out.
Up to the facts. I'm tense and nervous, can't relax, can't sleep, bed's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire.
This, of course, is Psycho Killer from their very first album. And you'll notice the very sparse setup in the background. You can see like ladders and scaffolding and stuff. Again, the idea behind this concert video is not just to come out with all the lights and the super rockin' show. It's to sort of show the build up as sort of the band built up to where they were at the point. So right now, of course, you just have David Byrne with a tape machine playing the drum beat and him on guitar.
You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything. When I have nothing to say, my lips are sealed. Say something once, why say it again? Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run away. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run away. Hey, qu'est-ce que c'est? Run, 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 run away. Oh, 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 yeah,
I love how they have the little disruption recorded on the tape, so it looks like it happened in the moment, but that was obviously pre-recorded. You can even see the stagehands in the background setting up the rest of the stage. So that's the first song, Psycho Killer. And now you'll see they add one musician at a time. Tina Weymouth on bass comes out for a song called Heaven.
Thank you.
This bass line here is just sublime. Check this out.
Everyone is trying to get to the bar. Name of the bar. The bar is called Heaven. The band in heaven, they play my favorite song. Play it one more time. Play it all night long. Oh, heaven, heaven is a place, a place where nothing ever happens. Heaven is a place, a place where nothing ever happens.
So Chris France comes out for Thank You for Sending Me an Angel. And this starts with just a really cool, tight drum riff. Almost like a marching band. Now we've got Found a Job with Jerry Harrison coming out on guitar. And you've got the four members complete for the first time. and the stage is getting set up fully.
It's not a major disaster. There's nothing wrong tonight, he said. I don't know what's the matter. Nothing to do, she said. So I don't know why you bother. We've heard this little scene. We've heard it many times. People fighting over little things and wasting precious time. They might be better off, I think. The way it seems to me, making up their own shows, which might be better than TV. Journeys in the bedroom, inventing situations.
Here you've got the choreography, little Alright, so now we've got sort of the whole band coming out for the first time. And let me refer to my Wikipedia page. We've got backup singers Lynn Mabry, Edna Hope, Bernie Worrell on keyboardist, percussion Steve Scales, this one's called Slippery People.
What about the time you were falling over and fall on your face? You must be having fun. Walk lightly, sing all the time. You best believe, riding out the like a wind inside a wind.
So now after about 4 or 5 songs, you've got the build-up with the stagehands bringing out the equipment and the background lit up. And now we are in full concert mode here. And this is sort of the crescendo of the opening part of the movie. And this is the last song we're going to play here on the podcast. Just know that after burning down the house is just, now it's just an amazing concert video, concert movie. This is just one example of how they rock out for the rest of the song. The rest of the video, excuse me.
Transportation.
Welcome back to the inaugural Coasters Optional podcast with Bennett, coming to you from the Coasters Optional Lounge. And for this inaugural edition, we're doing a deep dive into the Talking Heads. And we just did sort of a reaction video to the first several songs of their classic concert movie soundtrack, Stop Making Sense. And basically what they did is pretty brilliant, is they started the concert with sort of David Burns just on his guitar with a tape player playing the drum beat, and you could see all the scaffolding and stage setup in the background. And then each subsequent song, they add a band member, add an instrument, and ultimately 5 or 6 songs in, they get to the full arrangement, which is, with the background singers and the extra percussionists and everything. So really brilliantly done. That was just the first 5 songs. Of course, you can find it online and watch the whole thing. They're also going to be doing a movie theater release. I believe it's the 40th anniversary coming up next year. Those dates have not been announced yet, but I'll definitely be looking to see when that'll be playing in the theater so you can watch it on the big screen. But just to recap, we played Psycho Killer, Heaven, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel, Found a Job, Slippery People, and Burning Down the House. And that is again from the concert movie Stop Making Sense. So that's going to wrap up today's inaugural edition of the Coasters Optional podcast. Thank you for listening. I am Bennett, your host. Would love some feedback in the comments. Of course, rate, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. And thanks for listening, and tune in for another episode coming soon. Thank you for watching or listening to my podcast, Coasters Optional. This is just a fun passion project of mine. I really enjoy digging into my music collection and sharing music with you, and also rediscovering music that maybe I haven't listened to in a long time. So it's just a fun passion project. If you'd like to support me for providing you with this, then keep in mind that my real job is as a real estate agent in Central Connecticut. I'm on the Meali team at Keller Williams Realty. If you know anyone that has any real estate needs, not just in Connecticut, but anywhere in the country, I can put you in touch with the right real estate agent and help you out in any way I can. So thank you again for listening to the podcast, and I hope you come back soon.